Nkechi's life wasn't always filled with success. She was born in a small village near Nsukka, the youngest of 7 children. Her family struggled to make ends meet, relying on subsistence farming to survive. When she was just 18, Nkechi fell in love with Obinna, a hardworking carpenter. Their love was pure and strong, but life had other plans. Barely 3 years into their marriage, tragedy struck. Obinna died in a construction accident, leaving Nkechi with 3 young children and no way to support them. Her in-laws turned their backs on her, and her family, already stretched thin, could only offer sympathy but little else. Nkechi's move to Abuja was born out of desperation. With her last savings, she boarded a rusty old bus and arrived in the bustling city, her children clinging to her. The city overwhelmed her with its fast pace, the crowds, and the noise. For weeks, she searched for work, doing odd jobs as a cleaner or carrying goods in the market. But the money was never enough. One evening, after being turned away from yet another job, Nkechi sat on the curbside of a busy road, watching vendors sell roasted corn and fried yam. She noticed how people flocked to these roadside sellers, hungry and willing to pay for a simple meal. An idea sparked in her mind. The next day, Nkechi used her last 500 naira to buy a small pot, a measure of rice, and some spices. She borrowed firewood from a kind neighbor and set up a makeshift stand near a busy motor park. She cooked the rice and sold it with tiny portions of tomatoes too. Her children sat nearby, helping to fetch water and wash the few plates she had. Her first day was tough. She sold only a handful of plates, making just enough to buy more rice for the next day. Slowly, word spread among the motor park drivers about the quiet woman with tasty rice. Each day, more people came, and Nkechi began to feel a glimmer of hope. As Nkechi's business grew, so did her challenges. One rainy evening, after a particularly rough day of selling, she counted her earnings, barely enough to feed her children. She sat under an old tree, her heart heavy with despair. Then, she noticed an elderly woman sitting on a low stool nearby, dressed in an old but colorful wrapper. The woman's presence was unsettling, her eyes glowed faintly, and she seemed to appear out of nowhere. The woman spoke in a raspy but commanding voice. "Nkechi, I see your struggle. Do you want your life to change forever?" Startled, Nkechi asked, "How do you know my name?" The woman only smiled and gestured for Nkechi to follow her. Against her better judgment, Nkechi found herself walking through a narrow, dark path until they arrived at a small hut surrounded by thick bushes. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of burning herbs. The woman handed Nkechi a small calabash, decorated with strange symbols. "This will bring you success," the woman said. "But you must give it life. As you prepare your rice, place this beside your pot every morning and chant these words." She whispered the spell into Nkechi's ear, her voice barely audible. Then she added, "Remember, your gain will come at a cost. But what is the suffering of others compared to your children's future?" Nkechi hesitated but thought of her children, their thin faces, and their empty plates. She took the calabash and left. The next morning, Nkechi performed the ritual. She whispered the strange words as she placed the calabash next to her cooking pot. The rice cooked faster than usual, filling the air with an aroma that seemed richer and more enticing. That day, she sold out within hours. Customers praised the food, saying it was the best rice they'd ever eaten. Some even returned twice, bringing friends and colleagues. Nkechi was overwhelmed but also thrilled. She thanked the spirit silently and promised herself that this was the beginning of a better life. Within weeks, Nkechi's stand became the most popular spot in the area. Motorpark drivers began calling her Mama Rice, a name that stuck. She expanded her menu to include fried plantains, spicy goat meat, and beans, drawing even larger crowds. Her income tripled, and she rented a small shop to replace her roadside stand. The shop, painted in bright yellow, became a landmark. People would say, "Meet me at Mama Nkechi's," as if it were a famous restaurant. Nkechi hired 2 assistants, young girls from her village, to help with the growing demand. Her children, once thin and frail, now wore clean clothes and attended school. But as her success grew, strange events began to unfold. Customers began to whisper about feeling unusually tired after eating her food. A cheerful bus driver named Akin, one of her regulars, complained that his life was falling apart. "Mama Nkechi, your food is the best, but something strange has been happening to me," he said. "I feel tired all the time, and things keep going wrong in my life." Nkechi laughed nervously, brushing off his concerns. But deep down, she felt a pang of guilt. She told herself it was just a coincidence and continued the rituals. One night, Nkechi had a terrifying dream. She stood in a dark forest, surrounded by shadows. The voices of her customers echoed around her, calling her name. The old woman from the hut appeared and whispered, "They are noticing, Nkechi. Be careful, or the spirits will turn against you." Nkechi woke up trembling. But her determination to keep her newfound success blinded her to the warnings. She silenced her doubts and pressed on, but the cracks were beginning to show, literally. The once glowing calabash now had visible cracks, and the shadows in her dreams grew darker. Meanwhile, Ada, a spiritual seer living in the area, began to have visions of Nkechi's shop. She saw the trapped souls begging for freedom, their faces twisted in pain. She prayed for guidance and was directed to Pastor Joshua, a well-respected clergyman who had also grown suspicious of Mama Nkechi's rapid rise to success. Ada and Pastor Joshua decided to confront Nkechi. They armed themselves with holy water, olive oil, and a Bible, preparing for a spiritual battle that could change everything. As the day of reckoning approached, Nkechi's nightmares worsened. She awoke one night to find the shadows from her dreams creeping into her bedroom. Their whispers were no longer soft but loud and demanding, "Return what you have taken, or we will take it from you." On a cloudy evening, as the crowd at Nkechi's shop began to thin, Ada and Pastor Joshua arrived. Nkechi, distracted by the growing cracks in the calabash, didn't notice them at first. Ada's voice rang out clearly, "Mama Nkechi, your time is up. The spirits are angry, and they demand justice." Nkechi froze, her ladle trembling in her hand. She tried to feign ignorance, but Pastor Joshua's commanding presence left no room for lies. "Release the souls, or the spirits will destroy everything you've built," he warned. The crowd around the shop began to murmur, their curiosity growing. Nkechi clutched the calabash protectively, but even she could feel its power slipping away. The calabash began to glow ominously, and a high-pitched sound filled the air. Dark shadows erupted from it, swirling around Nkechi like a storm. The spirits' voices grew deafening, "You have betrayed us, Nkechi. Now, we take it all." In the chaos, Ada and Pastor Joshua sprang into action. Pastor Joshua prayed aloud, his voice steady despite the growing storm. Ada poured holy water onto the calabash, and it sizzled as the spirits recoiled. The shadows shrieked, their grip on Nkechi loosening. Nkechi fell to her knees, sobbing, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please, spare me." But the spirits were relentless. With a final, thunderous crack, the calabash shattered. A blinding light filled the shop, and the trapped souls soared into the night, their cries of freedom echoing across the city. When the light faded, Nkechi was gone. Her shop, once a bustling hub, now stood eerily silent. The crowd dispersed in hushed awe, their whispers carrying the weight of what they'd witnessed. Over the following weeks, life in Abuja returned to normal. Those who had been under Nkechi's spell felt lighter as if a dark cloud had been lifted. Her shop, once a landmark, became overgrown with weeds, a silent reminder of the price of greed. Today, The story of Mama Nkechi serves as a warning. Travelers passing through Abuja are told to be cautious of vendors who seemed too perfect. And on quiet nights, some say they can still hear whispers near the abandoned shop, a chilling reminder of the consequences of taking more than one deserves. In a village where ambition clashed with the unseen, Nkechi's rise to power came at a cost she couldn't foresee. When the spirits demanded justice, only faith and courage could tip the scales of fate. Would redemption come, or would greed claim it all?
The infinite vastness of all that is blackness.